Okay guys, so this module is about AST versus serviced accommodation. And if you'd watched the previous modules, then you would have already noticed that we have previously spoke about the different types of rental strategies. So why are we talking about ASTs and serviced accommodations again? Well, in our experience, the majority of landlords and agents don't really understand the key fundamental differences between these two modules outside of the income potential. Okay, so if you're a landlord and you're watching this and you have multiple properties, then this could be very beneficial for you because it could potentially help you move your portfolio in a different direction if needed. And if you're a new student and you don't have any properties and you're looking at getting into rent-to-rent serviced accommodation, then pay attention because understanding these differences could really help you with your negotiations in the future. All right, so let's talk about ASTs. So ASTs are the longest standing rental strategy in the whole entire world, and for a lot of landlords and agents, it's all they really know. But why is it so frequently used? Well, if we think about the ideal tenant outside of the potential problems that could arise, we're thinking about predictable income and low management intensity. When we look at the ideal tenant, we're thinking we're going to sign a tenant for 3 to 5 years at a decent, stable income and potentially never really have to communicate with them. So you're going to have essentially a passive business model. All right, but what are the real drawbacks? So in recent times, we know that the Renters Reform Bill is due imminently, and if you're watching this after May, then it's probably already in place. But that really means that for a lot of these landlords, they're going to have serious limited flexibility because the new Renters Reform Bill is constricting the landlord's rights against the property and essentially giving tenants more rights, even more so than they had before. So there's very limited flexibility if you decide that you need your property back for any reason. Now, you do have slower income growth. If you have one property, you may be seeing £300 to £500 per month. Maybe if you've got a portfolio of 10, this is looking a little bit more stable, right? But it's very reliant on tenant behaviour. It's harder to optimize returns and is sensitive to legislation shifts. So whilst it could be passive and it could be more predictable and have lower management intensity, there are a fair amount of drawbacks, especially in recent times. But I think the biggest one of all is the limited flexibility. A lot of landlords like to know that if they need to move their portfolio or move their properties in a certain direction, they can. And to be honest, they should be able to, but that's just not the case in the UK. So why would we consider serviced accommodation? Well, the first reason would be the higher income potential. Everybody knows this, but I think one of the biggest reasons is the complete and utter flexibility, because as we know, when a guest signs with us, they sign an excluded license agreement, which essentially revokes their rights as tenants, and it means that they don't have any rights over your property, exactly the same as a hotel. So for a landlord, this is going to give you much more flexibility. If you decide that you need to sell or you need to retain the property for some reason or reaccess, then you have that flexibility. And for that reason, that is a huge selling point, okay? But besides that, you have greater control over use, no long-term tenant lock-in like we discussed. You can adapt to demand and changes. If for some reason something isn't working, you can just shift, okay? So being able to have a plan B or an exit strategy is super important in this game. But there are some drawbacks. Now, you are going to experience higher management intensity, especially when you start. You've got things like guest communications. You then have to look at adjusting pricing, and you've got the seasonality, the income variability. But you do also have greater compliance obligations. So when you're looking at service accommodations similar to a hotel, you do need fire extinguishers. You could potentially need exit signs and different lighting. So you have to consider these things when moving into a service accommodation. You will generate higher revenue. You will have more flexibility, but of course there are more moving parts. You've got the systems and operations, they're quite heavy, and it could be not as passive as ASTs. That's not to say that it can't be passive, but when you're just starting out, you are going to be doing a lot of the work yourself. But if you're considering something like management, like we do rent to rent, but we also do management, this could be a very good bargaining point for someone like yourself, because you can offer the same amount of flexibility and revenue to these landlords. But if you're the one taking care of the management, now they have the complete passiveness that they did with ASTs, but they're getting higher revenue and they've got more flexibility. So you're going to be in a win-win situation. All right, so that's really the key differences between the two. Besides the income potential, you're looking at flexibility, management, moving parts. You need to consider these things. All right, so what is the key takeaway? So neither strategy is inherently better. It really depends on your area and your situation and potentially your available cash at the time. All right, so they prioritize different outcomes: stability versus flexibility, passiveness versus operational involvement. Understanding these differences allows landlords to set realistic expectations and choose suitable strategies and make better long-term decisions. So if you're a student here and you're looking at speaking to landlords and agents, understanding these differences will be key for your negotiations, because if you can explain this to a landlord and why this would be better suited, then it will make you the next obvious choice. All right, I hope you enjoyed that. Ask questions in the community. As always, you will get this Google Doc, and we'll see you on the next module.